My name is Nereida Dunn, and in this video, I am the principal conducting a PLC meeting with fifth grade teachers. The purpose of this meeting is to review the fifth grade science scope and sequence. Good afternoon, ladies. Thank you both for being here and everything you're doing to kick off a strong school year. I want to use today's PLC time to support you with pacing and planning, especially when we start to get into some of the more rigorous science teaks in the school year. So let's begin by reviewing our scope and sequence broken up by 9 weeks. So if you can look at your papers that I emailed you, as you can see, the scope and sequence document, we based our scope and sequence on the state adopted textbook. If you notice, in the first 9 weeks, we cover physical science. So this includes the TEKS for process standards and scientific engineering and process, properties of matter, which you will then break down into several weeks because it's a lot of content just in the properties of matter. Transformation of energy, light and electrical energy, and force and motion. So you will be giving a learning check at the end of the fourth week of the 9 weeks and in the eighth week of the 9 weeks. In the second 9 weeks, we begin with earth science. So notice that the review TEKS listed each week, in some of those, you may have to go to third grade and fourth grade TEKS. Those are prerequisites that you need to cover for the new objectives in fifth grade. So we start in this 9 weeks, we start with the solar system, Earth, Sun, and Moon, rotation and revolution, moon phases, the seasons, water cycle, weather and climate, and changes to the Earth's surface, and then we finish up with sedimentary rock and fossil fuels. In there, we also include the impacts of conservation. Those last three will be after the Thanksgiving break. We will have a review week before our winter work break as well. So now that moves us to the third 9 weeks. By the third 9 weeks, we are hitting the last category. So science is broken into three categories. This one will be organisms and environment. We start with ecosystems and biomes, and we focus on producers, biotic and abiotic factors, the energy flow and food webs, and impact to the environment, structures and functions, and instinctual traits and learned behaviors. And lastly, we compare life cycles. So by the third 9 weeks, we are done covering all of the objectives, and we go on to the fourth 9 weeks, which will have us begin with the first 3 weeks, using them for star review. So this is where we hit star questions. The weeks after star, we will have projects, science career projects, STEM projects, science fair projects, and all of these end of year activities. Before we go on to the lesson planning, I want to share with you, and I'm sure you already know, this planning tool, Lead Forward. It's not only helpful for breaking down TEKS by cognitive rigor, but also includes student misconceptions, which I think are very important to cover with the students. Academic vocabulary and instructional strategies, and this is a go-to page for all the star release questions, and they itemize them by the TEKS.
That's very helpful, Ms. Dunn. I always get confused when a TEKS has multiple parts or overlaps. So I like how they show the vertical alignment with previous grade levels. I really like that. It was very helpful for me.
Yes, exactly. I know what you mean. It does give us clarity on what's expected and how to scaffold up or down, depending on student needs. But by all means, this is just one tool. Please take advantage, please research and utilize all the resources that the district offers you. So now let's go into a lesson plan overview. And this is a lesson plan overview. Of course, you are teachers, you are creative, you are the creative ones. This is just the plan overview, and you decide how and what to apply in the lesson. So we start off by implementing a TEK, and this is the one that I'm going to use just for this purpose, and we're gonna cover TEK 5.12a. So you start with a TEK. Students will observe and describe how organisms interact with biotic, which are living, and abiotic, which are non-living components in a healthy ecosystem. So we're going to start with that.
Okay, so I've been reflecting on the challenges some students have had with differentiating biotic and abiotic factors in previous years. To proactively address that, I really suggest that we incorporate real world, maybe some hands-on activities earlier in that unit, like a schoolyard, ecosystem walk, or even like a simple terrarium project. This could really deepen conceptual understanding and engage students at multiple levels. Also, using lead forward misconceptions section will help us anticipate and then also clarify common errors before they really take root.
Yes, that is true, and great ideas with your science hands-on activities. That's great. So then let's move on to the engage part of your lesson plan. So in this part, for example, you can play a short video showing a Texas pond ecosystem. You can ask questions. What do these living things need to survive? How do they depend on each other?
Okay, so to maximize engagement, I plan to kind of incorporate questioning techniques that promote some critical thinking, such as why might an organism rely on particular abiotic factors more than others?
That's perfect. It's relatable and memorable. Great launching for that concept. Now, in the next part of their lesson plan, which is the explore, the explain, the guided practice, you can create an anchor chart, for example, where you compare biotic versus abiotic factors. You can use picture cards to sort organisms and environmental factors. Students work in pairs. They can work in pairs using sentence stems like a blank is biotic because blank, or it needs blank to survive. So these are really good sentence stems because, as you know, the STAR fifth grade science is already implementing a couple of short response questions. So that would be great.
Yes, I mean, I also think that we should pre-teach the vocabulary. I feel that we can go ahead and do that. Let's go ahead and do that. And because some of our ELL students, they also need the visuals, the repetition, and maybe add like gestures and foldables. And I believe that all of that is going to help them as well.
Definitely, Ms. Cancha. Visuals and academic vocabulary will go a long way. We'll mark those accommodations in your plan. Now moving to the elaboration, the independent practice of your lesson plan. For example, you can use, students can draw and label a balanced ecosystem showing 3 biotic and 3 abiotic elements. You can use digital platforms to explore ecosystems and compare survival strategies. You can use an exit ticket, name 1 biotic and 1 abiotic factor, and describe how they interact. You can do a quick check, circle correct examples on digital or a drag and drop activity. Now, for small group that goes in your lesson plan, for example, you can just pull students who struggle to sort living and non-living for small group review. Maybe you can add in more hands-on materials. You can use simplified visuals and sentence stems. You can include opportunities to talk and rehearse their ideas before writing. Kids always love rehearsing and acting, and so they enjoy all of that. So we will build this lesson in 5 days. So day one, you use for classification and discussion. Two for modeling, notebook entry. Day three, small groups or stations. Day four, you can have a science lab, and day five, you can assess. Now, be sure to include checks for understanding throughout the days. Okay, we don't want to wait for assessment until Friday, because obviously you're going to be quick checking, quick accessing Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday as well. Now let's revisit this lesson. We will revisit this lesson during the next PLC to reflect on how it went and share student work. We'll also use the lead forward and TEKS checklist to see if there are any misconceptions that we need to address. Remember that this is just an outline of the district format lesson plan, but by all means, be creative, unique, and innovative when creating your own lesson plans. So thanks again, team. Your collaboration is what helps our students thrive. Let's keep the momentum going, and good luck this year. We'll do great.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Christine Reeves, and in this part of the video, I am a principal at Goodson Middle School working with the 7th grade ELAR team at a PLC meeting to review the 7th grade ELAR scope and sequence. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for making the time to meet with me today. I know how packed our schedules have been, especially with just the start of school, So I really appreciate you both being here. Our goal today is to take a focused look at the 7th grade ELAR scope and sequence, specifically through the lens of the 7.6C analysis of literary text TEK. And just to really make sure that it really is aligning with our students' needs. How does that sound to y'all?
Sounds good to me, Ms. Reeves. I mean, I've had some thoughts about how we introduce and build up those higher analysis skills.
Yes, me too. I feel like we hit them hard with analysis, but sometimes the foundational skills aren't as solid as they could be.
That's why we're here. So let's go ahead and start by looking at the first 9 weeks. Our scope and sequence shows us starting with an in-depth unit on narrative elements, followed by inferencing, and then moving into theme and summarizing. Is that correct?
Yes, that's generally it. We spend about 3 weeks on narrative elements and then 2 on inferencing before jumping into theme.
Right. Now, thinking about 7.6C, analyzing the aesthetics of effects of imagery, figurative language, and sound devices in literary text, do you feel that we're giving students enough explicit instructions and practice with identifying and interpreting those devices before we ask them to analyze their aesthetic effects and the contribution to meaning?
Honestly, no. I find myself doing a lot of reteaching of basic identification of imagery and figurative language. When we get to the analysis pieces, it seems that we have assumed they've grasped this from previous grades, but many of my students are still struggling to distinguish between a simile and a metaphor, let alone understand their impact.
I'd agree. Some of my groups are still building confidence, just pulling out examples of vivid verbs or sensory details. I think we need more direct, scaffolded instruction on identifying these literary devices before we layer on the analysis of their effects.
I feel like this is really valuable feedback that we're providing each other today. So it sounds like we need to consider extending our introductory unit on narrative elements to include more robust focus on identifying literary devices, or perhaps like integrating a mini lesson throughout the inferencing unit. Let's note that as a potential adjustment to build a stronger foundation for 7.6C.
Okay. And also, when we get to the poetry unit later in the semester, we will cover imagery, figurative language, and sound devices all in one go, usually within 2 weeks. It feels incredibly rushed, especially for our EB students who are still working on understanding complex language.
Oh, I agree with that. There is a lot to unpack in a short amount of time. How do you think that we could pace it better to truly allow for deeper understanding, especially for that 7.6 CT? Maybe we could introduce imagery and figurative language earlier in the year, in connection with short stories, and then revisit that deepen that understanding of poetry.
I believe that would help if they've already encountered and identified these devices in prose. Applying the knowledgeable to poetry would be less overwhelming. We could focus the poetry unit more on the aesthetic effects once the identification piece is more secure.
Exactly. And we know from our assessment data that questions involving the analysis of how literary devices contribute to meaning are frequently missed. Slowing down the process here could significantly improve comprehension and performance on those higher level questions.
Another thought, when we introduce sound devices like alliteration and assonance, it's often very surface level. Our students usually need more time with auditory examples and opportunities to read aloud and hear the effects rather than just identifying them on a page.
That is a great point. Let's look ahead at the second 9 weeks and flag that as an area to build in more concrete and auditory support. We can check if the district resources provide audio examples, and if not, supplement with recording and additional read aloud time.
I think it would be beneficial to create some interactive stations where students can explore different sound devices and their effects in poems. I believe that kind of hands-on practice would make a big difference.
Perfect. That's the kind of collaborative thinking that genuinely improves instruction. So here's what we'll do. Let's each take a section of the year's scope and sequence and review it specifically for the following things: realistic pacing for achieving a deep understanding of 7.6C and related literary analysis techniques. Second, let's look at the opportunities that exist to scaffold the identification of literary devices before analyzing their effects. Third, let's look at the integration of vocabulary support for terms related to literary analysis, such as like the aesthetics, symbolism, and irony. And then the last thing, let's really look at that alignment with prior knowledge and opportunity to build upon previous grade level standards. Let's go ahead and plan to meet again next week to bring our suggestions and possibly remap a few units, particularly those focusing on poetry and more complex literary analysis. I can help cross-reference with the TEKs to ensure that we remain vertically aligned.
That sounds good to me. I'm excited to make some adjustments and that fit our students better and strengthen their analytical skills.
Yes, same here. I think we will make our literary analysis instruction smoother and less rushed, leading to better student understanding.
Awesome. I truly appreciate your openness and the input that you provided today. This is how we build strong instruction together. Thank you both so much.
Thank you, Ms. Reeves.
Thank you.
Okay, so now we are going to go on to our next week's meeting, and we are going to be doing a follow-up PLC. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for coming back. I know that we're all busy, so I really appreciate your time and the time for us to follow up on what we discussed last week. We did discuss some key areas in our 7th grade ELAR scope and sequence that we felt could be adjusted to better support our students, particularly with that TEK 7.6C and the analysis of literary devices. We each took a section of the year to review with focusing on pacing, scaffolding, and vocabulary support. I just kind of want to find out, what did you both find in your review? Miss Dunn, would you mind starting with your section?
Sure. I looked at the first 9 weeks and focused on our initial unit on narrative elements and inferencing. I feel like we could extend the narrative elements unit by about 3 days. Instead of jumping straight into plot and character, we could dedicate a few days to literary devices bootcamp, where we explicitly teach and have students practice identifying similes, metaphors, and sensory details using short, high-interest text. This would front load the foundational skills we talked about and give them a common language to use from the beginning. I also think that we can embed quick, like 5 minute mini lessons on figurative language into the inferencing unit, where students have to infer a character's feelings based on the imagery or that the writer uses. It's all about spiraling back to the concepts and not just teaching them in isolation.
Oh, that sounds great. So instead of a separate unit later, you're suggesting that we build that foundation right from the start and then reinforce it. I love that idea of the boot camp to get them to speed up or up to speed early. Miss Kay, what do you find in your review?
Well, I focused on the second 9 weeks, particularly in the unit of poetry, which they struggle. I agree with Ms. Dunn that we need to front load. My suggestion is to create a set of interactive poetry stations before we even start the formal poetry unit. Students could rotate through the stations focused on different sound devices. One station could have audio clips of poems, read alouds for alliteration. Another could have a visual activity for rhythm and meter. This would provide that concrete auditory support we talked about and would be especially beneficial for our EB students who need to hear that language to grasp its effect. I also found some great online tools that provide visual examples of imagery that we could use to supplement the text. I think that if we do this, we can shorten the poetry unit itself by a couple of days and dedicate that time to more in-depth analysis and writing, where they apply their skills instead of just learning them.
That's good.
These are fantastic ideas. They both directly address our goal of scaffolding, the identification of literary devices before we ask for analysis of their effects. It sounds like our game plan should be to create a new modified scope and sequence that integrates these changes. So now I kind of want to just address any concerns. I'm excited about... Pardon me, I'm so sorry.
Bless you.
Sorry. I'm so excited about the direction, but I also want to make sure that we're not creating new problems. Are there any immediate concerns or logistical issues that come to mind with these proposed changes? For example, how do we ensure we still cover everything that we need to cover with time adjustments?
Well, I think my main concern is the time. While I believe that the poetry stations will be very effective for students, setting them up and managing the rotation with 7 periods a day could be a logistical challenge. We'd have to be very organized.
I do share that concern, especially with the literary devices bootcamp. Finding high interest short texts that are appropriate for all our different reading levels might take a bit of work. I don't want to spend all my prep time searching for passages.
Those are both very valid concerns, and I'm glad that you brought them up to address these proactively. Like, let's kind of address them proactively. So for the poetry station, we can build them together. Let's dedicate some of our PLC time next week to actually building the stations actively and gathering materials. If we each take a couple of stations, it won't be a heavy lift. We can also think about how to structure the rotations to be efficient as possible. In regards to the literary device boot camp, I can create a shared document with a bank of resources. Well, I'll take the lead on finding a variety of texts from different genres, songs, lyrics, movie scripts, short stories, etc., that we can pull from. That way, no one person is shouldering all of the work. We can add to it as we find new resources throughout the year. Does that kind of help ease some of the concerns?
Yes, that helps a lot. A shared bank of resources would save a ton of time. That's a great idea.
And planning the stations together, I feel that's a great idea. It makes it feel much more manageable.
Okay, so here's the game plan. So first, we're going to draft the new plan. I'll take suggestions and draft the revised scope and sequence for the first and second 9 weeks. I'll extend the narrative element unit and include the literary device boot camp at the beginning, as you suggested. Ms. Dunn, I'll also map out the poetry unit with the poetry stations as a pre-unit activity. I'll also add the mini lessons throughout the year. Going into the resource collaboration, we can use a shared Google Drive folder that will gather resources. Ms. Kay, could you possibly add online tools you found to the folder, maybe with a brief description of how you envision using them?
Yes, of course.
Awesome. And Ms. Dunn, could you start brainstorming some short, high-interest text we could use for the boot camp and mini lessons? Think about things like song lyrics, short excerpts, YA novels, or even graphic novels.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, and then going into cross-referencing and aligning. While I'm drafting, I'll cross-reference, the new plan with the 7.6C TEKS and other related standards to ensure we're vertically aligned and meeting all of the requirements. I'll also check with 6th and 8th grade teams to make sure that our changes don't create any gaps for them. Just lastly, it's kind of a final review. I'll send out a draft to both of you by the end of the week for your final feedback or review and feedback. We can use the comments feature on the document to make it easy and a very collaborative process. This is the exact kind of work that makes real difference in our instruction. By slowing down and building these foundational skills, we're giving students a much better chance at mastering those high-level analysis standards. This isn't just about passing a test, it's about giving them the tools that they need to be critical readers and thinkers. I truly believe that these changes will lead to greater student confidence and improved performance on our assessments. Thank you both so much for your feedback and your collaborative spirit. I appreciate your dedication to students, and I'm going to go ahead and get started on that draft now, and I'll be in touch by the end of the week. Please let me know if any other ideas pop up.
We will. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Reeves.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Gloria Canchef, and in this part of the video, I am the principal at Armando Serna Elementary conducting a 4th grade PLC in order to review the scope and sequence for math.